welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for what is maybe one of the most urgent system upgrades needed in modern warfare. And we're not talking about a new missile or a new sensor. We're talking about the human capital, the people who actually run the warfighting machine.
That's right. I mean, the battlefield today, it's become this digitized ecosystem. It's a data fire hose where sensors and data streams are they're multiplying. We call it C5ISR capabilities.
And that gets to this great paradox, right?
It is the paradox of our time. You have this incredible technological sophistication, the ability to sense everything, everywhere, instantly. And yet the human systems, the people who are supposed to process this just overwhelming stream of information, they're struggling.
They're drowning.
Completely drowning. We've automated the tech, but the people managing the network, the people interpreting the data, they're being swamped.
So the technology's moving at machine speed, but the people, the institutions, they're still running at human speed.
Or maybe even slower, hampered by, legacy thinking.
So what's the fix? That's our mission today. We're going to explore a really powerful, I'd say revolutionary proposal. It's aimed at fundamentally changing how the U.S. Army manages its command and control, its C2 functions.
Yeah, we're really looking at the argument for, abandoning a dated kind of ad hoc staffing structure and instead adopting a system modeled after one of the great successes in military history, which is the Navy's Combat Information Center, the CIC.
The CIC. A dedicated hub manned by career experts.
Exactly. It's a highly specialized place for data management and tactical action. And the Army, the argument is the Army needs its own land-based version of that.
And this really gets to the core of the problem the sources are highlighting. We're demanding these modern warfare capabilities, things like machine-to-machine microorders, complex C5ISR integration, AI-driven predictive logistics. It's all built on high-speed data.
Right. But the personnel who are currently tasked with executing all this, they often just don't have the deep career-long technical literacy to keep it all running, let alone fight with the system when it, inevitably breaks.
It's a systemic mismatch.
Totally. The tools are cutting edge, but the management mindset is rooted in, 20th century processes.
So for you listening today, this deep dive is really your shortcut. It's about understanding why the Army needs a completely new kind of professional, the operations specialist, or OS.
And this isn't just rebranding. It's about validating data management, C2 synchronization, making it an essential, career-defining warfighting discipline.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with why the current system is failing so fundamentally. Why does it feel like the commander is so often fighting the network instead of the enemy?
You really have to understand the environment inside the current Army Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, to get it. The source material describes it as a pickup game.
A pickup game. That's not what you want for the nerve center of a military unit.
Not at all. It's an ad hoc assembly of staff, not a finely tuned professional team.
And there's this corrosive cultural friction that the sources call the penalty box culture. That's a brutal phrase. Can you detail what that actually means for an officer's career?
It's rooted entirely in the incentive structure. In the Army, promotion, career success. It's traditionally tied very rigidly to success in your basic branch.
So we're talking infantry, armor, field artillery.
Exactly. The people who command platoons and companies, that's the main path to advancement. So time spent in the TOC, dealing with data feeds, managing these C2 systems, it's often seen as a deviation, a career pause.
I see. So if you're a high-performing armor captain, a real rising star, and you get assigned to the brigade S3 staff to manage the network, the message you're getting is that you're off the main path. You're sacrificing time that you could be spending getting a really critical command evaluation.
Precisely. And in the worst cases, the TOC becomes a literal penalty box. It's a place to assign personnel who, let's say they require closer supervision. Or maybe they're recovering from an injury and can't perform their field duties.
Wow. So the message that sends, loud and clear, is that the technical discipline needed to run the fight is secondary. It's less important than leading troops in the field.
It tells everyone that this is not where the A-team is. And that's an unsustainable model when your entire unit has to operate at the speed of data.
So the staff is transient. They're in the TOC for maybe 12, 18 months before they rotate back to a line unit. And they're often unmotivated because they see it as a career detour. The entire C2 ecosystem has to suffer from that.
The motivation is low, The professionalism is transient. And this organizational friction, it feeds directly into what the sources call the integration gap.
The integration gap.
A profound lack of systems literacy among the people who are actually supposed to be managing the battle space.
Okay, let's clarify that gap, because the Army does have technical professionals, right? You have the Signal Corps, the 25 series soldiers, you have knowledge management people. What's the difference between what they do now and what this new operations specialist would do?
It's a critical distinction. It's technical support versus operational fighting. A Signal soldier, a 25 series, their job is to ensure the network is active.
Lights are green.
The lights are green, exactly. The routers are configured, the antennas are pointed the right way. And knowledge management, they organize the files, the documents.
Right.
But here's the key. Neither of them is trained as a core warfighting discipline to fight the system. They're not trained to deeply understand the operational data flows themselves.
So the network might be up, the hardware might be working, but if the common operating picture, the COP, is throwing errors, let's say because the air defense data isn't correctly translating as coordinates for the fire support system, the people in the TOC today don't have the training to diagnose that operational data problem.
Exactly right. They can check the box that the router is up, but they can't troubleshoot the data structure failure that's preventing a joint fire mission from going through. The consequence of this is constant disruptive churn. Yeah. A new commander arrives, he's unfamiliar with the complexity of the system, maybe he just doesn't like the existing software, and so he switches to a different tool based on his preference, not on technical efficacy. And this instability just erodes any institutional knowledge because nobody stays long enough to truly master the deep functionality of any single system.
That churn must be incredibly disruptive.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the demands of modern warfare. I mean, we're asking these units, like the proposed Combined Arms Motorized Battalion, to function at a level of technical sophistication that is, well, it's unprecedented.
It is. That concept requires the unit to function not just as a fighting force, but as an advanced C5 ISR and edge compute node. Let's just break down C5 ISR for a second. Command, control, communications, computers, cyber, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It's a massive technical footprint.
And when you describe it as an edge compute node, you're basically saying the battalion headquarters is a forward-deployed, militarized data center.
Precisely. I mean, think about the infrastructure you'd need. You're managing clustered arrays of blade servers, not just laptops running high-end operating systems. You're hosting sophisticated predictive logistics AI, and you're executing automated machine-to-machine micro-orders.
That's heavy-duty back-end infrastructure management.
It is, and it requires more than just a technical certification. It requires deep institutional memory.
Which you can't have if your staff is transient, if you're losing that institutional memory every 18 months. They're constantly just relearning the basics instead of mastering the system and innovating with it. I mean, managing 1,500 sensors, which the sources suggest a modern battalion has to do, that seems overwhelming for a staff that sees the job as temporary.
It is overwhelming, and you shouldn't expect success under those conditions. This is why mission command, which is philosophically brilliant, the art of delegating intent to your subordinates, it has to be matched by a rigorous technical discipline.
The art of tactics from the commander and the science of control from the staff.
Yes, and right now, the science is being neglected. It's being neglected because the staff is rotational, not professionalized. That organizational friction is just. It's severe. It's actively penalizing the very technical mastery that the modern battlefield demands.
So if the diagnosis is basically amateur hour in the technical heart of the unit, the proposed fix is radical for the Army. It's adopting the framework of the Navy's Combat Information Center, the CIC, and creating this dedicated operations specialist concept. Let's delve into that Navy heritage a bit. What does the CIC model provide that the Army so desperately needs?
Well, the COC is a purpose-built space. It's highly specialized, both physically and organizationally. It's where all the incoming sensor data, radar, sonar, intelligence, it's all fused, analyzed, and then presented to the commander in real time. But the critical part is that it's manned by career specialists. In the Navy, that's the operations specialists, the OS rating. They spend their entire careers mastering the integration of those sensors and systems.
And that's the continuity. That's the piece the Army lacks. So the core idea here is to create a career warfighter whose weapon system is the data itself.
Exactly. This ensures you have that deep technical specialization, that continuity that the current rotational model just can't provide.
Yeah.
This OS branch would be the institutional memory for all C2 systems. And we should probably break down the three distinct components of this proposed new branch.
Okay.
You have the enlisted operator, the warrant officer integrator, and the commissioned officer manager.
Right. Let's start at the foundation, the enlisted operations specialist. This is the one modeled directly on that Navy OS rating the operator.
This is your human-machine interface, your HMI expert. This is the soldier running the screen, the keyboard, the tactical picture. And crucially, they do not rotate back to a line platoon or some other basic branch role.
Their whole career path is vertical within that C2 environment.
Yes. They advance from being a specialist in a company operations and intelligence cell, an O&I cell, all the way up to being a supervisor in a division or corps TOC.
That guarantees expertise built over years, not just a few months. What are their specific day-to-day capabilities? How do they relieve the maneuver commander?
They become the absolute subject matter experts in managing the common operating picture. They're the ones who can instantly read air tracks from drones, who can manipulate complex drone feeds in real time, and who can ensure the data integrity across multiple visualization layers. So in that combined arms motorized company, for example, this enlisted specialist in the O&I platoon takes the technical systems management burden completely off the company commander.
So the commander can focus purely on tactical decisions.
Right. He trusts that the OSNCO is managing the complex interplay of the systems behind the scenes.
The recruitment strategy here is also really interesting. It seems designed to retain talent the Army might otherwise lose.
Absolutely. The sources suggest drawing personnel from the combat arms who show a strong aptitude for data. So as automation or force structure changes, a reduction in force, a RIF displace soldiers in traditional combat roles, this gives them a vital pathway to stay in. You get to retain their valuable combat experience. You get people who understand the fight, but can pivot to the technical side of the fight.
And that preserves that core warfighter ethos inside the C2 domain.
Exactly.
Okay, moving up the chain, we have the Operations Warrant Officer. The sources describe this role as the technical anchor, the unit's true chief data officer.
That's a great description. They are the master integrator. Their job is the highly complex task of bridging the gap between the commander's philosophical intent and the messy cross-platform technical reality of the network.
But we should be clear here. They're not just configuring the network, like an existing signal warrant officer, a 255A.
No, not at all. A 255A focuses on routers and transmission, making sure the network is up. The OS warrant officer understands what the data means operationally, and they ensure that all these disparate mission systems can talk to each other seamlessly.
Let's use a concrete example to highlight that difference. What's an integration task this warrant officer would do that a current signal warrant couldn't?
Okay, think about the targeting chain. The OS warrant officer is responsible for integrating systems like AFADS, that's the artillery system, AI, the airspace integration system, and AMDPCS, the air and missile defense system.
3 totally different stovepipe systems.
Exactly. So if a commander intends to suppress an enemy air defense system with his artillery, while also coordinating safe airspace for a counter-UAS drone launch, it's the warrant officer who ensures the data from all 3 of those stovepipe systems is feeding correctly and automatically into the main COP.
So if the commander wants to execute a complex deception operation, say, using automated logistics to fake out the enemy, the warrant officer is the one who makes sure those machine-to-machine tasking orders are correctly written, integrated, and then executed across all the relevant systems.
Precisely. They're the ones who make the complex backend speak a single, unified language for tactical effect. And that requires years of dedicated technical training. It's not something a signal warrant who spent his early career fixing radios would naturally possess.
Right. And then finally, at the top of this structure, you have the commissioned operations officer, the manager, the strategic synchronizer, who parallels the Navy's tactical action officer, the TAO.
Yes. This officer, who would likely access this field after a successful company command, provides the high-level stability and operational management. They're the ones who run the current operations floor, the CUOPS floor. And their presence, their expertise, means the chief of operations, the CHOPS, who is often a very experienced lieutenant colonel, he's freed up to actually focus on strategic decision-making and future planning instead of constantly being dragged down into troubleshooting system errors or data flow problems.
So they're the continuity factor, especially when you're integrating data from outside the Army's own bubble.
Correct. They become the deep experts in integrating joint and commercial data feeds. They ensure that all the technical pieces the enlisted operator and the warrant officer are managing are aligned with the overall strategic and operational scheme of maneuver.
Here's where it gets really interesting. when we start to see how introducing these specialized roles fundamentally changes the fight at every single level. From a small company O&I platoon right up to a joint task force headquarters, let's dig into the operational mechanics here.
Yeah, this is where the theory hits the ground. Introducing this dedicated career operations specialist,
Huh.
it fundamentally changes the warfighting capability of every level of command because you're professionalizing the management of the entire data-to-effect chain.
So let's start at the tactical edge, the company level. In this notional combined arms motorized company, a 150-person formation, the OS is embedded in the operations and intelligence platoon, the O&I platoon.
It's a small team here, maybe just 1 or 2 OS NCOs, but their impact is completely disproportionate to their size. They are the technical stewards of the company's internal mesh network, and their primary function is to ensure that sense effect link is instantaneous and robust.
Sense effect. So the link between the sensors and the shooters. Walk us through a scenario there. How does the OSNCO prevent a failure that would cost critical time?
Absolutely. So the company deploys an air maneuver platoon for drone and ground sensors. They find a high-value target. The fires platoon has the indirect shooters ready to go. Now, if you have an amateur staff, that sensor data has to be passed up via voice or manually typed into a system up to the battalion. Then some temporary staff officer up there has to try and translate it into a fire mission. You're wasting minutes.
Critical minutes.
Critical minutes. The OSNCO, on the other hand, ensures that the data automatically flows through the company's own mesh network directly into the fire control system. This reduces engagement time from minutes to seconds, and it bypasses the slow human friction of going up to battalion headquarters.
So they're the technical plumbers. They ensure the company commander can fight autonomously without constantly having to ask for tech support from higher up. That dramatically increases agility.
It creates tactical freedom. Now let's step up to the battalion level. This is where the sheer scale of the data problem requires this kind of specialization. The source material notes that a modern battalion is processing data from over 1,500 sensors. It's a mix of tactical drones, human reports, counter-UAS systems, individual vehicle status reports, everything. So this headquarters is no longer just a tactical command post. It's a dedicated edge compute node.
A battalion headquarters as a mini data center, running complex algorithms while under fire. So the OS role here shifts to managing servers and AI.
They manage the actual hardware,
Yeah.
the clusters of blade servers that host all that data processing capability. And they are running sophisticated AI algorithms, not just for visualization, but for things like predictive sustainment.
Predictive sustainment. That sounds a bit abstract. Give us a concrete example of an OS executing micro orders in that kind of environment.
Okay, take fuel consumption. The AI is constantly monitoring the real-time fuel burn rates of all 80-plus vehicles in the formation. If the AI detects that one maneuver company is burning fuel at a rate 20% higher than predicted, a deviation that could mean high-tempo combat or a route change or even a leak, the OS manages the AI's response. The AI might automatically generate a microorder to the supply unit to modify the resupply rate or even reroute a fuel truck immediately.
And the sources mention using this same capability for deception operations. How would that work in the data domain?
Well, it means the OS can execute microorders that modify the reporting data. For example, they could instruct the system to simulate higher logistics consumption rates in one area while suppressing the reporting from the area where the unit is actually moving. This feeds confusion directly into the adversary's intelligence collection systems.
And again, the key here is the division of labor.
It is. The maneuver staff focuses entirely on the art of tactics, the decision-making, the scheme of maneuver. While the OS manages the science of control-making, the machines execute the commander's intent reliably and quickly.
Now let's look at the absolute apex of complexity, the Joint and Combined Headquarters. Places like USARPAC in the Pacific or USARAF in Europe. This is where you have all these disparate allied systems, different security classifications, the highest level of technical friction imaginable.
And this is where the OS truly becomes the primary custodian of technical interoperability. The friction is highest here because every nation, every service, they all bring their own legacy data ecosystems. The Army OS has to be trained to bridge all those gaps, to speak the technical language of every single partner.
And they play a specific, legally sensitive role in managing data fusion, especially when you bring in commercial sources.
Yes. They manage what are called federated access gateways. This concept is crucial when you're integrating data from what the source calls commercialized targetry, so data streams from unclassified or commercially available satellites and sensors. The OS acts as the crucial firewall separating these unclassified streams from the highly classified firing networks.
And why is that separation so essential, beyond just basic security? The source mentioned chain of custody.
Chain of custody ensures the legal admissibility of your target data. If a strike results in unintended collateral damage, that targeting package has to be legally defensible. The OS is responsible for ensuring that when that commercial data moves from an unclassified cloud environment into the high-side, classified fire control system, the data integrity, the chain of custody, is maintained and documented every single step of the way. This requires specialized technical and procedural knowledge that a temporary staff officer simply will not have.
Okay, so let's track that target package. An OS receives commercial sensor data, fuses it, confirms its integrity. Then what?
Then they ensure the unit can immediately ingest what's called a platinum score target package. That's a term indicating a target with near zero collateral damage concerns. The OS is the linchpin in that whole targeting chain, ensuring that data, whether it comes from a commercial satellite, a Navy destroyer sensor, or an Army battery, is translated instantly into an executable fire mission without any delay.
And this technical mastery is what makes them the Rosetta Stone when they're integrating with Joint and Special Operations Forces, or SOF.
Absolutely. So often, integration fails simply because of incompatible data formats, not because of a lack of cooperation. The Army OS is specifically trained on the data structure of joint systems like JOPES, the Joint Operation Planning and Execution System, used for massive logistical movements. And they're trained on the sensitive protocols you need to share intelligence with SOF elements.
So when an Army OS joins a joint task force, they can immediately speak that Purple Staff C2 language. They understand the Navy's operations specialists and the Air Force's command managers because they all share a common professional technical baseline. It breaks down those legacy service silos.
It completely bypasses the wasted hours spent translating and troubleshooting. Instead of asking, hey, what file format are you using? They can instantly move to, how can we synthesize our effects together?
This whole shift from a rotational staff to a professional data warrior, it requires a complete systemic overhaul. And the sources capture this with the acronym DOTMLPF: Doctrine, Organization, Training, Material, Leadership, Personnel, and Facilities. This is the heavy lift. We need to go deep into this framework because this details the true cultural and organizational cost of making this change.
Right. Let's start with doctrine and organization. This is what establishes the new turf for the OS.
So the philosophy of mission command, the high-level concepts and things like ADP 3.0, that remains the broad guiding principle. But the OS branch takes custody of the detailed technical doctrine.
Yes, the science of execution that translates that philosophy into actual practice. The OS branch has to develop and maintain the detailed manuals, the checklists, the standard operating procedures that dictate how the systems are actually used.
What data protocols are acceptable, how to handle system failures, the exact steps for data integration.
And this is vital because software and sensor capabilities, they change constantly. The doctrine has to keep pace with every new software update and every new sensor you integrate.
And organizationally, this means the end of that ad hoc detail staffing model we were critiquing earlier.
Absolutely. The organization has to formalize the TOC. You need permanent staffing with dedicated OS sections embedded at the company level in the O&I platoon and in the S3 and G3 operations shops at battalion, brigade, and division. This is the mechanism that really solidifies the battalion headquarters' identity as a C2 and compute hub. It ensures that infrastructure has dedicated, permanent stewards.
That stability is the bedrock for the whole concept. But stability means nothing without rigorous training. Which brings us to T, for training, centered at the Mission Command Center of Excellence at Fort Leavenworth.
The training has to be comprehensive. It has to go far beyond any existing programs. So current, excellent courses, like the Mission Command Digital Master Gunner or MCDMG, they'd be absorbed and expanded into the OS core curriculum, but the training can't stop there. It has to focus heavily on interoperability.
Which means cross-system literacy. They have to understand systems they don't personally run.
Precisely. The OS needs to know the data structures of adjacent systems. They need to understand AFEDS data, which is run by the 13F Fire Support Specialists. They also need to be familiar with systems like JOPES, run by the 88N Transportation Coordinators.
Why, though? Why does an operations specialist need to understand a transportation system?
Because the tactical picture is useless if you can't accurately predict and synchronize your logistics movements. The OS isn't tasked with running a railhead, but they have to understand the data flows of the railhead management system well enough to integrate that logistical reality into the tactical COP.
So you're bridging the operational and logistical worlds through data. And what about commercial tech mastery?
Correct. The curriculum has to go way beyond just operating the front-end visualization of platforms like Palantir's Maven or Gaia. It's not enough to be able to look at the map. They need to train on the Foundry backend, the data engineering component. They have to
Yeah.
learn how to integrate new, non-standard data streams and how to troubleshoot when the API feeds break down. They are data engineers, not just data users.
And they have to bridge the gap between that high-side server data and the soldier at the tactical edge.
That's the edge integration piece. The curriculum has to mandate mastery of how you ingest tactical data streams from handheld systems like ATAC, the Android Tactical Assault Kit. If the OS can't seamlessly integrate real-time position data from an ATAC device into the central battalion server, the whole concept of the edge compute node just falls apart.
Okay, moving on to M for material. How does professionalizing the user base actually stabilize the hardware and software procurement process?
It provides a stable demand signal. The problem today is these constant religious wars over C2 systems. They're driven by rotating commanders who bring their own personal preferences. This leads to massive hardware and software churn every 18 months, and it wastes billions. If you have a professional OS core, they can dictate stable requirements based on long-term technical efficacy, not just personal preference.
And that stability allows the Army to invest in long-term, complex systems like those dedicated server clusters for AI, instead of constantly swapping out equipment just because a new kernel likes a different visualization tool.
It creates institutional trust in the material. The OS can lobby for and maintain continuity in their equipment, ensuring they master the systems over their entire career.
Now, L&P leadership and personnel. This seems like the truly culturally disruptive part. This branch fundamentally removes the requirement for command for career progression.
That is the seismic shift. For the operations specialist, technical mastery and operational synchronization, those become the primary metrics for advancement. They are judged on how well they integrate and harmonize effects, not on their success leading a platoon or a company in the field.
I have to challenge that a little bit. If you remove the requirement for commanded troops, don't you risk creating leaders who understand the screen perfectly, but have no feel for the friction or the reality on the ground?
That is the risk. It's a huge risk, and it's why the sources focus so heavily on incentivization. To address this, every single role within the C2 environment, from the company OSNCO all the way up to the core chief of operations, must be designated as key developmental, or KD.
And for those unfamiliar with the military structure, explain the significance of a KD assignment.
A key developmental assignment is a required billet. You must fill it successfully to be considered competitive for promotion to the next rank. By designating these OS staff roles as KD, the Army institutionalizes the value of that technical expertise. It sends a message that this staff duty is not a pause. It's not a penalty box. It is a dedicated, necessary, and career-enhancing warfighting discipline.
So it removes the incentive for staff to try and escape staff duty just to get that command block on their resume. It encourages them to stay and deepen their expertise.
Yes. The OS's leadership is exercised through the synchronization of effects. It's a specialized form of technical authority. And crucially, this solves the Army's huge talent retention problem. It prevents these technical experts from rotating back to line units just as they finally achieve mastery of the systems.
And finally, F for facilities. Specifically, the role of the SCIF, the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility.
The OS doesn't replace the security staff, but they change the SCIF's function. SCIFs are designed for maximum security, but they often become these passive vaults, totally disconnected from the rhythm of the battle. The OS ensures the SCIF is transformed into an active operational node.
And how does the OS integrate the SCIF into that sense effect cycle we talked about?
They are the technical bridge for classified data flow. They're key to rapidly ingesting what's called digital exhaust data collected in commercial clouds or lower classification environments, and bringing it rapidly into the high-side SCIF when it gains classification status or is needed for a high-stakes decision. The OS makes sure the SCIF is active, responsive, and fully integrated into the operational timeline.
So we've established the need, the specific roles, the whole systemic overhaul required. Now let's get to the practicalities. How does the Army actually stand up this new corps of professionals, particularly for the commissioned officers? The sources review two main courses of action, or COAs.
And these two options, they perfectly reflect that tension we've been discussing all along. Technical depth versus tactical relevance.
COA-1 is the full branch model, the pure Navy approach.
This creates a specialized operations corps. You'd recruit officers from the moment they access the Army right out of commissioning all the way up through colonel. They're literally raised in the CIC environment from day one.
The advantages seem clear. You get the deepest possible expertise, the strongest cultural identity, because these officers spend their entire 25 or 30-year career focused purely on data and C2 mastery.
But the drawback is significant, and it gets right back to your earlier challenge. It risks creating an insular community that is profoundly disconnected from the friction of ground combat. An officer who has never slept in a fighting position, who's never led a platoon in the dust, they might lack the tactical visualization skills to really understand the operational implications of the C2 picture they're managing.
Which brings us to COA-2, the functional area model, sometimes called the space cyber model, which relies on a mid-career transition.
In this model, officers access the OS field only after they have served successfully in a basic branch. So usually after they complete company command in infantry, armor, or artillery. The enlisted soldiers would still transfer in after their first term, but the officers must have that tactical background first.
This maximizes tactical reality. The OS officer understands their customer, the maneuver commander, because they've been in their boots. They bring practical, hard-won tactical experience to the technical fight.
That's the fundamental strength. They know the difference between a clean data point on a screen and a data point that is inherently unreliable because they understand how hard it is to gather that information on the ground.
But I have to ask, doesn't COA-2 fundamentally compromise the deep technical specialization we said was so necessary? I mean, if you wait until they're a captain or a major to transition them, you're sacrificing years of technical education and hands-on system mastery compared to COA-1.
That is the core trade-off. It's a very valid concern. You risk having officers who are tactically smart but technically just capable enough, rather than true technical experts. However, the source material ultimately suggests that for the Army, given its reliance on ground maneuver, the risk of creating a technically brilliant but tactically naive officer corps under COA-1 is just too high, at least initially.
So what's the final recommended approach from the source material?
The recommendation is a hybrid approach. For the officers, COA-2 is preferred, at least to start. This mirrors existing successful models like Functional Area 26 for network or 59 for a strategist. It ensures they have that crucial tactical grounding. However, and this is key, for the enlisted and warrant officer cohorts, the technical operators and systems integrators, a dedicated branch, COA-1, must be implemented immediately.
So the goal is to rapidly build that permanent, deep technical base from the bottom up with the operators and integrators, while ensuring the officers who lead them still possess those real-world tactical visualization skills. You're bridging the gap between the screen and the soldier.
What we've detailed today is it's far more than just an organizational chart revision. It is a fundamental transformation. It's shifting the Army culture from a legacy practice of just assigning bodies to the TOC to a modern mandate of manning the Combat Information Center with highly trained career professionals.
And the implication for warfighting capability seems immense. By professionalizing C2, you're essentially freeing the combat arms commanders, the officers and NCOs leading the maneuver force, to focus entirely on the art of maneuver.
That's it. They can trust that the science of their systems, those 1,500 sensors, the predictive AI algorithms, the seamless integration of joint targeting data, is being managed by career experts who will not rotate out just as they achieve mastery.
This is the essential human capital update that's necessary for success in multi-domain operations.
The technology for the transparent battlefield is already here. The human structure to manage it has to urgently catch up, and the operations specialist. That's the key to making that complex, data-rich battlefield manageable and survivable.
So what does this all mean for you?
Well, the entire operations specialist concept is predicated on elevating technical mastery and operational synchronization to the absolute highest tier of professional achievement, potentially even surpassing the traditional value we place on direct command authority. So the question to think about is this. If technical mastery, not command of troops, becomes the primary metric for advancement within this future OS branch, what kind of cultural shift will that induce across the entire force? Will the value of the technical expert begin to rival that of the tactical commander? That's the fascinating evolution of military leadership that this deep dive suggests is already well underway.